15 years ago, my wife looked at me, our 3 small children huddled in the doorway, and spat the words that would become the engine of my life. I can't live like this, Jacob. I can't live in this failure. Then she left. Today, there's a woman standing at the gleaming gates of my company headquarters. Her shoulders are slumped, her face etched with a desperation I remember all too well. She's here to beg for an entry-level job. She has no idea she's about to ask the man she abandoned for being poor for a second chance. And I have no idea if I have one left to give. Our life wasn't always so desperate. There were moments, fleeting but brilliant, where love really felt like enough. I'll never forget the day we brought our youngest, Lily, home. Our 2 boys, 7-year-old Noah and 5-year-old Ethan, just pressed their faces against her bassinet, their eyes wide with wonder. I looked at my wife, Sarah, and in that cramped, slightly damp apartment, I felt like the richest man on earth. I was a mechanic, working long hours. My hands were always stained with grease, and my body ached. But at the end of the day, I came home to them. I came home to laughter bouncing off peeling paint and the smell of whatever simple meal Sarah had managed to stretch for the 5 of us. But that feeling, it was a currency Sarah had stopped valuing. The peeling paint started to bother her more than our family's laughter pleased her. The threadbare carpets weren't a symbol of our journey anymore, just our stagnation. She started talking about her friends, the cars they drove, the vacations they took. Her words were like little pebbles hitting a window, and soon, cracks started to show. "Brenda's husband just got a promotion," she'd say, scrolling through her phone. "They're going to Hawaii. Can you imagine, Jake, seeing water that's actually blue?" I tried. I took on extra shifts, started doing side jobs on weekends, fixing neighbors' cars until my knuckles were raw. Every extra dollar went into a jar labeled, "For a better life." But the jar filled so slowly, it was like trying to fill the ocean with a teaspoon. For every dollar I added, her list of wants grew by 10. The argument started small, then blew up into nightly battles. Our home, once our sanctuary, felt more like a courtroom where I was always on trial for the crime of not being enough. "Look at Noah's shoes," she'd hiss, holding up a pair of sneakers with the sole peeling off. "His friends have brand-name shoes, Jacob. Your son is going to school looking like a charity case. He has shoes that fit, Sarah. He has food in his belly and a father who loves him," I'd plead, my voice raw with exhaustion. "Love doesn't pay the bills," she'd shout back. "Love doesn't fix the leak in the ceiling. Love doesn't stop me from feeling embarrassed every single time I leave this apartment." The kids felt the chill. Noah, my thoughtful boy, would just retreat into his books. Ethan, my little ball of energy, became quiet. And baby Lily would just cry, reflecting the misery that had seeped into our walls. I tried to shield them. I'd build forts out of blankets, telling them we were kings in a castle, not a family in a crumbling apartment. I'd hold them tight and whisper stories, trying to drown out the sound of their mother's unhappiness. The breaking point came on a cold, rainy Tuesday. I'd just been laid off. The garage was downsizing. I walked home in a daze, the flimsy severance check in my pocket, feeling like a death certificate for our future. When I told Sarah, something in her face didn't just fall, it shattered. She didn't cry or yell. A terrifying calm settled over her. She just looked at me, her eyes sweeping over my grease-stained shirt, my worn-out boots, and finally, my face. It was the look you give something you're about to throw away. "That's it," she said, her voice completely flat. "I'm done." "Done? What do you mean you're done?" "Sarah, it's a setback. I'll find something else. I always do." She laughed, a short, ugly sound. "Something else? Another greasy, dead-end job that barely keeps our heads above water. I can't do it anymore, Jacob. I wasn't made for this." She had already packed her bags. 2 sleek suitcases stood by the door, looking like they belonged in another world, a world she was determined to join. "What about the kids?" I whispered, my voice breaking. She flinched, the first crack in her icy composure. "They'll be better off without a mother who is miserable all the time. They deserve more, and so do I." The children were standing in the hallway. Noah stood in front, his small body rigid, Ethan peeked from behind him, his thumb in his mouth. In my arms, Lily started to fuss. Sarah knelt, but it was a stiff, awkward gesture. She kissed Lily's forehead, told Ethan to be a good boy, and then stood in front of Noah. He wouldn't look at her. He just stared at her expensive-looking shoes I'd never seen before. "Noah," she said, her voice a little shaky now, "you're the man of the house for a little while, okay? Help your dad." Noah didn't answer. She walked to the door, not looking back. As her hand touched the doorknob, I finally found my voice. "Where will you go?" She turned, her face a mask of cold resolve. "My friend Brenda introduced me to someone, a man named Richard. He's in finance." She said finance like it was a magic word. "He understands ambition. He doesn't see worth in calloused hands and a weak paycheck." Then she delivered the final blow. The words burned into my memory forever. "You're a good man, Jacob, but you're made of sawdust and failure, and I refuse to be buried under it with you." The door opened, and the sound of a powerful engine filled our quiet apartment. A sleek, black car was waiting. She got in without a backward glance. The car pulled away, its taillights disappearing into the rain. I sank to my knees, Lily wailing in my arms. Noah finally looked at me, his young face a mirror of my own heartbreak, but hardened with a resolve no 7-year-old should have. Ethan started to cry. In that moment, surrounded by my 3 weeping children, I made a silent vow. I would not be buried. I would not be a failure. From these ashes, I would build an empire, not for revenge, but for them. That first year was its own special kind of hell. The silence Sarah left was louder than any of her arguments. I was a single father of 3, unemployed, with severance pay that was disappearing fast. I found another job at a garage during the day, and at night, after putting the kids to bed, I worked as a janitor in an office building. I'd get home around 2 a.m., reeking of disinfectant, and catch 4 hours of sleep before getting the boys ready for school. Lily was in a low-cost daycare that always smelled faintly of bleach and sadness. Every dollar was for rent, food, diapers, or bills. There was never enough. Poverty is a thief. It doesn't just steal your money, it steals your dignity. I felt it every time I had to put items back at the grocery store checkout, my cheeks burning with shame. I saw it in the patched knees of Ethan's jeans, and the way Noah tried to hide his free lunch tickets from friends. It was the constant, gnawing fear that one sick kid or one car problem would be the end of us. The kids were my reason for everything, but they were also my biggest source of guilt. I was there, but my mind was always somewhere else, calculating bills. I saw the toll it was taking. Ethan grew quiet. Lily had terrible separation anxiety. But Noah worried me the most. He was becoming a little man, his childhood crushed under the weight of responsibility. One evening, I came home to find him at the kitchen table, trying to glue the sole back onto his shoe with my old tube of industrial adhesive. Tears of frustration were silently rolling down his face. "Hey, buddy," I said softly, my heart cracking. "What are you doing?" "It came off again," he mumbled. "Kids at school, they called them flappers." I knelt beside him, my body aching with exhaustion, and put my hand over his. "Leave it, son. I'll buy you a new pair tomorrow." He finally looked at me, his eyes old and weary. "But you need the money for the rent, Dad. I heard you on the phone. We can't afford it." In that moment, something inside me snapped. It wasn't despair. It was pure, white-hot rage. My 7-year-old son was worrying about rent. The vow I made the night Sarah left was no longer just a promise. It became a plan. The garage where I used to work always had the same problem: unexpected breakdowns. The owner would always say, "If only we knew it was coming." That phrase echoed in my head. After the kids were asleep, I started spending my nights not cleaning floors, but in our damp garage. With a clunky, second-hand computer and Wi-Fi I could steal from the coffee shop across the street, I started learning to code. I read everything about machine diagnostics and sensor data. My janitor's salary started going toward cheap sensors and circuit boards. I was running on fumes. Some nights I'd fall asleep at the workbench, woken only by the birds at dawn. The kids would leave me little notes. "Don't work too hard, Dad," Noah would write. Ethan would draw me as a superhero. They were my fuel. My idea was simple. Create a system that could listen to a machine, its vibrations, temperature, sounds, and predict a failure before it happened. I called it the Phoenix Engine, because I intended for it to rise from the ashes of my life. For 2 years, all I did was fail. I almost gave up a dozen times. One night, after a power surge fried my main processor, I just sat on the cold concrete floor and cried. I was tired, broke, and failing. Then, the garage door creaked open. It was Noah, now 10, holding a glass of water. He sat down next to me, put his arm around my shoulder, and handed me the glass. "It's going to work, Dad," he said, with total certainty. "I know it will." That was the turning point. I wasn't just doing it for them anymore. We were doing it together. Ethan helped me sort wires. Noah started reading my coding manuals and, to my amazement, began pointing out errors in my logic. 6 months later, I had a working prototype, an ugly little box wired to an old lawnmower engine. On my computer screen, a graph tracked the engine's vibrations. Then, an alert popped up. "Warning, bearing fatigue detected. Estimated failure in 12 operating hours." I let it run. 11 hours and 52 minutes later, it seized with a deafening shriek. It worked. I took the prototype to my old boss and offered to install it on his main lift for free. He was skeptical, but he agreed. 3 weeks later, my system alerted him to microscopic wear in a high-pressure hose. He ignored it. The next day, the hose burst, shutting down his busiest bay and costing him $5,000. The following Monday, he wrote me my first check, $1,000 to install the Phoenix engine on all his equipment. I quit my janitor job the next day and started Phoenix repairs out of my garage. Word of mouth spread. The next few years were a blur. We moved out of the apartment and into a small house with a yard. The big break came from a regional trucking firm plagued by breakdowns. I did a trial run on 10 trucks. After 6 months, their unscheduled maintenance costs on that fleet dropped by 70%. They signed a multi-million-dollar contract to outfit their entire fleet of 5,000 vehicles. That changed everything. Phoenix Repairs became Phoenix Enterprises. The money started pouring in, amounts I could barely comprehend. We moved into a beautiful home. I hired help so I could finally just be a father again. I was at every academic decathlon, every soccer game, every dance recital. One afternoon, I was sitting on the porch of our new lake house. Noah, now a high school senior with a full scholarship to MIT, sat down next to me. "You did it, Dad," he said quietly. I looked at him, my brilliant, kind son. I looked over at Ethan and Lily skipping stones on the water. The pain of the past was still there, a scar that would never fully fade, but it didn't ache anymore. "No, son," I said, putting my arm around his shoulders. "We did it. The day Sarah came back into my life, I was in my office on the 50th floor of the Phoenix Enterprises Tower. My assistant, Clara, buzzed my intercom. "Mr. Anderson, there's a sensitive situation with your 10 o'clock. Clara never uses the word sensitive. "What is it?" I asked. She stepped into my office. "We have a final round interview for an entry-level admin position. The candidate's name is Sarah Miller. Previously Sarah Anderson. Our HR protocols flagged it. Her resume says she's been out of the workforce for over a decade. Her previous husband's business collapsed. She's desperate, sir." The world tilted. Sarah, here, now, about to ask for a job at the company built from the failure she ran from. The irony was suffocating. "Where is she?" I asked, my voice steady. "Interview room 3. She has no idea about the connection, sir. To her, Jacob Anderson is just the name of the CEO." I stood and walked to the window, looking down at the city. Sawdust and failure. "I'll do the interview myself," I said, turning back to Clara. "Alone. Bring her here." A few minutes later, the door opened, And there she was. 15 years had not been kind. The vibrant woman I remembered was gone, replaced by someone who looked tired and worn down. Her suit was neat but cheap. The fire in her eyes was gone, replaced by a dim, pleading flicker. She looked around my office in stunned awe, and she didn't recognize me. To her, I was just a man in an expensive suit. "Please, have a seat, Miss Miller," I said, gesturing to the chair opposite my desk. "Thank you, Mr. Anderson," she said, sitting on the edge of her seat. I walked around and sat down, letting her see my face for the first time. I watched as confusion turned to dawning horror, then to a complete collapse of her composure. The blood drained from her face. "Jacob?" she whispered. It can't be." "Hello, Sarah," I said. Her eyes darted around the office, trying to connect the man she left in a pitiful apartment with the man sitting before her. "But how?" she stammered. "Phoenix Enterprises. This is yours?" "I built it," I said simply. "Right after you left." That hit her. She visibly shrank in her chair. "Richard, his company went bankrupt," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "We lost everything. He left me a few years ago. I've been struggling." I just nodded, offering no sympathy. Tears welled in her eyes. "I was a fool," she choked out. "So stupid, so cruel. I left you. I left my children. For what? For a life that turned out to be hollow." Then she slid from the chair and onto her knees on the plush carpet. "Please, Jacob," she begged. "I'll do anything. I'll clean the floors. Please, don't do this for me. Do it for the memory of what we once had." The memory of what we once had. A leaky roof and hungry kids. A husband working himself to the bone. I looked down at her, this broken woman at my feet, and I felt nothing. The anger was gone. The need for revenge felt empty. This wasn't a victory. It was just sad. "Stand up, Sarah," I said, my voice firm but quiet. She shakily got back into the chair. "You're right," I said. "You were cruel, and you didn't just leave me. You abandoned your children. Do you have any idea what it's like to hold your 7-year-old son while he tries to glue his own shoes together because he's afraid his father can't afford a new pair? Do you know what it's like to see childhood drain from your kids' eyes because they have to carry burdens no child should ever bear?" She flinched at every word. "I can't give you a job, Sarah," I continued. "Not to punish you. This company was built on the sacrifices of my children. Their fingerprints are on every brick in this building. Bringing you here would be a betrayal of them, and I will never betray my children again." Her last bit of hope died. "However," I said, opening my desk drawer and taking out a checkbook, "I'm not a monster. You are the mother of my children, and for their sake, I have to acknowledge that." I wrote a check. Enough for a new start. Enough to restore a little dignity. I pushed it across the desk. "This is not a gift," I said, my voice cold and clear. "It's severance. For the role you gave up 15 years ago. Take it and get your life in order. Then you will leave me and my family alone. Our story is complete, and you are no longer in it. There are no second chances here. Not for you." She stared at the check, then at me, and nodded slowly. She took it, her hand trembling, and walked out of my office, out of the company, and out of my life, forever. The door closed. I turned back to the window. I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt closure. The ghost of Sarah Anderson was finally gone. I picked up the photo of my smiling, happy children, and I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my soul, that I was the richest man on earth. You see, this story was never really about the money. True poverty isn't an empty bank account. It's an empty heart. And true wealth isn't a skyscraper. It's the loyalty of your family and the dignity you build with your own 2 hands. Sarah chased an illusion and ended up with nothing. I was left with nothing but my 3 kids, and it turned out they were everything. They were the reason for the struggle, the purpose behind the success, and the real treasure. In the end, it seems everyone gets what they truly value. If this story moved you, please give it a like and subscribe for more stories that remind us of what truly matters. I have to ask, what would you have done in my position? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below.